Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. This is our Recommend or Refute episode. I am your host, John Garcia. We got the usual suspects with us this time. Joining me, Ryan King.
Hey, how's it going? I watched a lot of movies, but I picked one horrible one to talk about.
Were they on planes or off planes?
I watched a few on planes.
Oh, okay.
I watched a good one on planes because I watched the bad ones off planes. So
wow.
I ran out of
We're living
things
in
to watch.
Why would you watch a good movie on a plane? Like, you're like, oh man, I want to watch this good movie. Let me find the worst environment possible where like they're going to interrupt it with flight attendant news and it's going to be way louder than the movie I'm listening to. And it's going to like shock my eardrums. And then I'm not going to be able to hear the movie when it comes back in because I'm half deaf now.
I love that climactic scene in Silence when Andrew Garfield is like, his overpowering silence is deafening, and then it goes boom, boom. This is your captain speaking. Landing
Get a little bit turbulence.
Yeah, totally. It makes sense.
And then you don't hear the rest of the movie.
That's the experience for me.
Yeah.
My potential viewing experiences are in my bedroom at a weird angle because my TV's in the corner and it's an older like 720p. Or on a tablet on an airplane.
Get a fucking
like
reasonable TV, Ryan. Come on.
We're starting a GoFundMe for this.
I have a nice 4K television downstairs on which I can only watch family movies. So
Ryan,
he watches the Haunted Mansion.
4K televisions are like $3 now. Like it's not a big expense.
Best Buy messaged me the other day and they were like, "You want a 65-inch TV? Just buy a 75-inch one and we'll give you that one for free. Just fucking do it and send
just
both
come
to
into
you."
Best Buy. No one's here, please.
For the love of God.
Talk to me, Jesus Christ. I haven't seen another human being in weeks.
So tired of wearing this blue shirt, God damn it. Oh my God. All right. I'm sorry. We have to cut this off so we can continue the rotation. The other voice you heard spitballing random horror stories about Best Buy is our very own Michael Dixon.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to go, I guess.
Judging by your Best Buy takes, you've been into that technological purgatory that we all know.
Oh yes.
Just recently ceased physical media support.
Yeah, I haven't really been back since they stopped selling Blu-rays.
Barnes
because
and Noble
I'm a
until they
weirdo
quit.
that still buys those, but as John and I are just holding out as the last two people that still buy Blu-rays.
Hold the line. Me for schlock and him for art.
Yeah. I got a microwave at Best Buy because it's the only place you can buy a microwave like same day.
Does it play Blu-rays?
To like bring home and immediately put in. Yeah, I wish it played.
You put them in.
Wait, do you just have a microwave like sitting on your counter plugged into the wall?
No, I had to install it.
Okay.
It's above range. Yeah, I needed like an above range microwave that day immediately. And Best Buy is like the only place you can go buy something.
What emergency was
shelf.
happening where you had to have a microwave same day?
The other one broke.
You couldn't use your stove? Was your stove also broken?
He needed his microwave chicken nuggies.
Was your toaster oven also broken? Like what?
My children and my wife needed a microwave.
Oh my God.
Or else. Yeah, I know. I use the stove, fucking everything.
I never use my microwave. Like I just only.
Yeah, I really don't use the microwave.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Tech Talk, a subdivision of Afterthoughts, where we talk about microwaves and other products that we buy.
What are your thoughts on refrigerators?
Recommend or refute or refrigerate? There we go.
Refrigerate.
Anyways, you know the rules for Recommend or Refute. We go around and we talk about a movie that we've watched recently or a TV show, and we recommend it or we refute it. We don't do ands here, although sometimes some people say and. It doesn't apply. So
Ryan is the one that accidentally says recommend and refute, but John is the one who actually can't decide and does
some
the
of
old
us sit on a fence.
Splitting his ball sack on the fence.
There's a real poetic element to it. It rhymes in a way, I suppose. We need each camp here to bring the tribes together.
I'm the only one who actually abides by both speaking recommend or refute correctly and acting it correctly.
Well. Johnny Two Shoes or Goody Two Shoes. What the fuck am I saying?
I don't know. It's the whiskey talking.
Yeah. Fucking law-abiding Johnny Good Soul. Don't give a shit. Anyways, Ryan, you were recently on a plane. You watched a good movie there, so tell us about what you watched while you were off the plane.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, mention a throwback that I did watch The Holdovers on the plane, which that's not a movie.
Surprised you never held. You held over long enough to watch it on a plane. Good job.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be in 4K or IMAX or whatever
Sure.
to enjoy The Holdovers, right? Like, no, but I did quite enjoy that movie, so I also give it a high recommend. But the only bad movie that was available on the plane that I would have watched was the new Wonka. But I had already watched that with my family against better judgment.
I've spent the past 7 years traveling the world perfecting my craft. You see, I'm something of a magician, inventor, and chocolate maker. So quiet up and listen down. Nope, scratch that, reverse it.
Mr. Wonka, I can see you're a man of great ingenuity.
What are you doing?
I'm making chocolate, of course. How do you like it? Dark, white, nutty, absolutely insane.
Many people have come here to sell chocolate. They've all been crushed by the chocolate cartel. You can't get a shop without selling chocolate, and you can't sell chocolate without a shop.
On a 4K screen.
Yes, actually, that is the one I watched on the 4K. Totally. Exactly. That's the difference.
Despite the fact that it is definitely rendered in 1080p because that's all CGI.
Yeah, it might as well be Speed Racer, the fakeness of that movie. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I knew from the instant they announced it, I was going to hate. And then from trailers, I knew I was going to hate. And the whole time I was sitting there, I knew I was going to hate it. So like, maybe I'm predisposed for it. But it really falls in that category of like, do we fucking need this? Like, right? Like, is there just nothing else we can do that this is something we feel like we need? Like a hot young Wonka origin story?
I love it. I picture when you say, do we fucking need this? You're talking to Hollywood executives standing over a dead horse with clubs in their hands. And they're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Is there not a new horse we can start beating? Like, come on. Yeah. So I like, it's not worth so much talking about the movie. Like the thing is like I got stuck mainly trying to think about where this falls within Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Wonka, like whatever, as a prequel. And like, it just couldn't work. And then I'm like, oh, is this an alternate universe, Willy Wonka? Like, I spent most of the time thinking about that because it's pretty much, he learns the lessons that he learns in the Wonka Charlie Factory, whichever one you prefer.
Wonka's Great Charlie Factory.
Yeah. Yeah, mainly he learns the lesson of like, it's better to eat chocolate with someone else, right? Vaguely. And that's exactly like what the end of Wonka is. But I'm like, he can't go on and then be the asshole that he is in the other movies.
Wait, are you saying the lesson is here. Like, don't drink alone, basically? Is that the
pretty
much. Wonka movies?
Here,
find a drinking buddy.
Why do you think I brought you on
find
this
someone
podcast?
else to
So you can drink alone?
Yes. And it, like, so I will go slightly on the tangent about the previous. I like Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which
Willy
is the Gene
Wonka
Wilder.
and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's one I watched as a kid and I enjoyed. I think that part of what I really enjoy about that one is that Willy Wonka is an asshole. And like, he is the antagonist. Like, there's no way you can't look at that movie and be like, he's the antagonist. Charlie is our protagonist that we're following, our everyman, like that maybe we could see ourselves in a situation. And Wonka is the asshole that's letting people die and or probably killing people or
he is the CEO of the chocolate factory,
enslaving workers in horrible working conditions.
He's the asshole despite the fact that both of his names are euphemisms for a penis.
Right. Surprisingly. Yeah. And he totally just tortures those children.
And the
Ocean Stanzards be damned. Yeah.
Where's the movie about like the union of the Oompa Loompas rising up to fight against the evil tall people that are enslaving them to make chocolates? That's the movie I want to see.
The fact that they have a policy for people falling in like chocolate or falling down things already tells you Oompa Loompas are doing that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
there's so many dead Oompa Loompas at the bottom of the chocolate tubs where they're just making chocolate on top of the carcasses of Oompa Loompas.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's like how a few like...
That's the magic
there's a certain amount of
like Oompa Loompa flesh that just like happens to get into the chocolate. It's like 0.1%.
There's a certain amount of like spiders that are okay to be in your peanut butter. There's a certain amount of Oompa Loompa percentage that the FDA allows in. But like if you watch Wilder's performance in there, he like actively like at times The best example is when the kid's like drinking out of the chocolate river, and he's like, "Oh no, don't!" With like this complete apathy. Like he doesn't really want the kid to stop. He doesn't really care. He's just like kind of showing a bit of it, and the way he clearly like fucks with everybody in there. The whole premise of how he's fucking with Charlie, like with this gigantic, tiny print script, and sending someone out to give him fake candy, right? That potentially steal. Like he's an asshole the whole way through, and then like Charlie has the heart of gold, and so it wins over Wonka in a way. But the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Tim Burton Johnny Depp one, like shits over that and then tries to like give more backstory, and it's just more chance for Johnny Depp to be weird, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work.
I feel like we have enough of those,
Yeah.
But Tim Burton getting a chance to put Johnny Depp and his own wife into something, will always be there. That's his thing to do. But actually, like in talking about this, in complaining about Wonka to my family, my daughter Ella is like, she's in defense of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and says that Wonka is like, the Wonka Gene Wilder one is like a little too scary, a little too weird, which I'm like, that's what makes it wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was like, no, the other one, like there's more of Charlie. And she's like, you get to know more of him. And I was like, that can't be right. So I went back and actually pulled up the timestamps, and you do not see Willy Wonka until 1 hour to the 1 hour mark in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And you see Johnny Depp at 33 minutes in the Charlie and the Chocolate
Factory. Oh, I thought
Factory.
you were going to say 33 seconds. I just assumed they were going to put him in there right
it was like
away.
right from the beginning. Yeah, maybe like I meant like plot warranted. Maybe he's like there for a second or whatever. Yeah, I mean like actually at the factory for in the beginning of the Gene Wilder version, we do get more of Charlie. We get more of like finding the golden ticket. Yeah. I will admit, when his fucking mom sings about, I don't know, laundry or fucking whatever, that's the part I fast forward through. That part is absolutely terrible. But the things I love is the guy that's trying to use the computer to find a golden ticket. And then he's like gonna split the deal with the computer, and the computer like writes back to him is like, what would I do with the golden ticket? And then he starts writing back, and he's like, I'm telling him exactly what he can do with that golden ticket, like angrily, just
Wait,
stupid.
Which movie is this in?
It's the original.
That's the Gene Wilder original one.
Yeah. There's just a lot of good dry humor in
stupid
that
shit
one.
at the
I
beginning.
don't remember that.
There's like the
but I haven't seen it since I was probably like 10 years old.
Yeah, they show like everyone in the world, and the Oompa Loompas are already racist to begin with, so whatever, can hand wave some of it. In the original one, they're like showing everyone in the world like on the news talking about it, and it's all these different languages, and then they cut to one like channel, and it's just two people like banging on a drums to their village about the golden ticket, like it isn't like but just stupid shit like that. It does not take itself seriously at all. And I do love when they're in the candy store, one kid totally gets his head fucking knocked when the candy man opens that little thing to come back from the back to the front, and they just kept that take. I always love those things. Look it up.
Yeah, it's a much more brutal movie, it sounds like.
Yes, it's a very different
Ryan,
movie.
did you watch all three versions this week?
No, I just watched Wonka, but I can tell you everything about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the drop of a hat.
Things.
Yes, so Wonka, like, it doesn't add anything to the Wonka. It just is like trying to take a nostalgia trip.
It's like a different movie entirely. It's like shouldn't even be named the same thing.
Yeah.
All it does is borrow like, hey, remember the music? We'll just cock tease you all the way through to the actual songs you care about. It is a musical. That was, yes, I know you guys were like, well, the other ones are musicals. And I'm like, they're not.
Not to the same degree.
Those are movies with music. Yeah. The Oompa Loompas, it's diegetic. They're singing. It's diegetic. The Oompa Loompas are singing. But in this one, it has that exactly what I think we've all complained about, where like suddenly everyone in town knows the song
Wonka
as well,
in the
and the
Heights.
dancing. And
yes,
yeah,
that really should have been the title. Oh my god, yeah.
Lin-Manuel's out there making chocolate, making little kiosks.
Oh
god!
And so that rubbed me the wrong way immediately. I will say I do feel like Wonka has a lot of like Roald Dahl type in it, because it is that kind of like over the top sad bullshit that's unrealistic to children. Where like the beginning premise, Wonka gets fucking tricked into signing a contract at this hotel / laundromat that like imprisons him in indentured servitude. which he's just, they're like, everyone there is kind of like okay with, of like, well, it was in the contract.
Yeah,
like,
all the cops don't care. He just wants to stay one
Yeah.
night at this hotel, and turns out he has to stay forever. It's the Hotel California, and he never knew.
Yeah,
So he
and
enslaves
they're like
Oompa
talking
Loompas.
to each other. Yeah, through their like bedroom jail cells, like out the window outside or whatever. And I was like, that's some Roald Dahl stupid shit. Like, I'll give it that. And and the like crazy shit that Candy does. Like, there's a little bit of like, they got the gist of that, but they don't get any of like what makes the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or the book like either like good or endearing. And just kind of bring in the usual like, oh, he comes into town and he's the cool, nice one with the cool shit. And the bureaucrats want to keep him down. And
I knew a guy like that.
Don't let him
with long
succeed.
hair
Yeah,
and a beard. His name was Jeff. He hung
Yeah.
out at the auto
His
parts
name
store.
was Charles Manson.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways,
so it's like this is that category where I'm like, I don't understand how these things are getting made and how this is the best service of our time and why Chalamet would sign up for it.
Yeah.
Like, either, I guess, maybe the fucking giant Brinks truck pulled up, I guess.
yeah, with all the money in it.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out. Look at all this chocolate, Chalamet.
When the trailer came out for this movie, I was morbidly curious because I was like, Timothée Chalamet has never done a bad movie. Like, I have seen most of his work in his career. He's one of the best actors working, and he's never done a bad movie. I was like, this looks horrible.
Yep.
What is going to happen here? Like, is there any redeeming quality in this? Is it going to prove me wrong? Maybe I'll actually like it. Went to see it. Did not like it.
Yeah.
This was definitely the first bad movie that Timothée Chalamet has been in. And I feel like it has to be, he just got so much money that he just couldn't say no. And it was like, he's done the 2 Dune movies, and those are blockbusters where he could make a bunch of money, but at least that's like a really well-made movie by an auteur
impeccably.
director who, like, they can do something interesting and talk about, class and Messiah syndrome and colonialism and whatever. But this just feels like, all right, I got a taste of that Dune money and I want some more. Like, it just doesn't feel like, I mean, I guess it's not a fucking superhero movie, but it kind of is at the end of the day,
Yeah.
It's like he just solves all his problems by making chocolate, and like,
It does something, yeah.
There's this really stupid scene in the movie where he makes chocolate that is called hover chalk that makes you fly.
Is this
and it's
when
because
Michael Key starts floating around? or
yeah,
something?
because there's like some sort of bug inside the candy, and like that's a fucking health code violation, first of all. But second of all, it's like it feels like they're trying
Not
to
in Europe.
explain the scene from the first Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory where they like fly up to the ceiling.
Yeah,
but that
yeah.
is a soda that they drink and
Fizzy
then
lifting drink.
belch it out in order to fall back down. This is like, no, you just eat a piece of chocolate and there's some weird insect in there that makes you fly.
They
And
have
like,
to shit it out to get down.
yeah, exactly. What the fuck is this? This is bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. And like, Chalamet does what he can with it. Like, he is, charming and has a personality in the role, and he's clearly trying to do something. But like, there's just nothing there. It's a terrible script. It's a terrible concept.
Yeah.
There's one interesting idea about like monopolies where like, the local chocolatiers have paid off the police in order to like be the big boys on the block, and they make it so that you can't open up competing chocolate shops, and they actually make shitty chocolate,
They're
but
all
everybody
working
thinks
together
it's
in
good
secret.
because it's an oligopoly where there's only like 3 chocolate shops, and it's like basically the epitome of the American economy.
Yeah.
So like, that's an interesting idea that they try to put into it, and like, hey, actually, if you just like try to make something good instead of, conniving with your fellow competitors to all make shitty chocolate and charge a bunch of money for it, maybe you can actually do something interesting and innovate. But that's just not an interesting enough concept, and the movie doesn't care enough about that to really like make that enough to make the movie worth seeing. All the songs are bad. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie. It doesn't have good writing. It doesn't have good songs. I did like fucking Olivia Colman. I thought she was good in it, as the like weird horny hotel owner who just like can be, she's like this evil person who is holding all these slaves that have just the only sin they ever committed was trying to stay one night at her hotel. And then Wonka, gets to sneak out by like having convincing some weirdo to dress in lederhosen and come by her hotel.
Pretend
and
he's like the count of something.
Yeah, act like he's some German royalty or something, and she just gets super hot and bothered.
About?
It's weird, man. She just gets really turned on, and all she wants to do is fuck this big fat dude in lederhosen, and therefore Wonka can like leave the compound and go sell his chocolate and do whatever he wants. It's weird, but I liked that weird dynamic of it, and I was like, Olivia Colman playing a Cockney hotel owner was kind of funny to me, but again, it's just not enough to get past all of the bad songs and the stupid characters and all that.
Yeah. In Wonka's defense, like, yeah, people floated and one girl turned blue, but he didn't sell that shit on the street. That was still in his laboratory.
Right.
He told them not.
In the chocolate factory.
Yeah, Gene Wilder.
Yeah, well, in both of those, in the book or whatever, right? The kids, they float, and Grandpa floats, and he drinks the fizzy living drink, and Violet turns violet. But it's like, those were things he was experimenting, and he explicitly wasn't selling them and told them not to touch that shit. And all we see out on the market is regular ass chocolate bars. Like, and it's all, it seems to be all he really sells, other than the shit he's experimenting on. Where this one, he from like day one, he's giving people crazy shit that he's experimenting on with crazy ingredients.
Yeah, that like conjures storms and makes people fly and all this shit.
There's no FDA back then, or whatever the fuck the European equivalent is.
Yeah,
if anything, he's a little bit more of an actual asshole in this movie from like an experimenting with chocolate standpoint.
Does he give them chocolate filled with semen? Is that
not explicitly?
Yeah, it's like
okay.
Yeah, it made me think of the
outright
joy juice.
Yeah,
is that what they call it? Or
it made me think of the old Monty Python skit, the chocolate frogs.
Crunchy frog. Ah, yes. Am I right in thinking there's a real frog in here?
Yes, a little one.
What sort of frog?
A dead frog.
Is it cooked?
No.
Oh. It's kind of the same thing where the inspectors come in and they're like asking about all the different like chocolates in the little assorted mix. And one of them's like chocolate frogs. And he's like, is that a real frog that's in there? And he's like, yeah, we wouldn't call it chocolate frogs if it didn't have a frog in it. Like,
there's a real Frenchman in that.
This just in, the French president has threatened swift and massive retaliation if he doesn't receive an immediate apology.
So yeah, it's just a complete like waste of talent and time. Yeah, again, like Key is hilarious, but he kind of will do anything at this point.
I actually thought he was bad in the movie. Like his character was so poorly written that I don't know that anyone could have really done anything with that role, but I thought he was like grating.
I have to hand it to Keegan-Michael Key because he still gives it his all in any situation, but it just ends up being like, yeah, if it's poorly written or underdeveloped or something, it's like, it's not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he takes like anything kind of, it seems like from a role standpoint. Yeah. So it's like, you can't really.
He's in his Nicolas Cage in debt phase.
Right.
I would love if.
Well, that's where Hugh Grant is.
Yeah, Hugh Grant. That's the only reason I was going to say. The only reason I would watch this movie is because I'm not a huge fan of Hugh Grant, and it's a Schadenfreude for me. To know that he hated so much of this movie. I'm sure it built him a nice house or whatever the fuck it did.
I didn't know that he hated the movie.
But he said he hated being in like the fucking, he said it was grueling being the Oompa Loompa.
Yeah.
And then he hated it.
He shot that shit all on a green screen, right?
Yeah,
that was like a day of work.
He thought it was awful. He was like, this is a terrible thing. And so that's the only reason I would watch this is because yeah, Hugh Grant, fuck you. I sat through Love Actually. I saw what you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where he's in front of a green screen and there's no one else there.
It's like Sir Ian McKellen when he had that mental breakdown on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, what am I doing in my life?
But at least he gets to interact with other people.
That's true.
Through a lot of the filming. Like, they were actually there.
Yeah, Elijah Wood is also there in front of that green screen.
Well, so Ryan, you're saying that you would recommend Wonka, right?
I recommend Wonka. I do not recommend Charlie and the Chocolate
Factory. I tricked him.
No, I don't recommend Wonka. It was decidedly terrible. I don't recommend the Johnny Depp Charlie and the Chocolate Factory either.
Yep.
Again, it served no purpose. It didn't add anything new. It just dragged out some of the worst part of those movies. And it gave like a background to an insane man that doesn't need a background. Like that's the same problem with Wonka.
An insane colonizer who doesn't need a background.
He's a magical, insane wizard that we don't need to know where he came from.
Exactly.
Who subjugates an
Like,
entire
that's not
indigenous
important.
people.
I don't need to know how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. I just want to know who he is
You
now.
know about how much Darth
Just
Vader
need to see him
hates
choking
sand?
people.
And yeah, of course, I recommend for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes, recommend for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
All right.
Factory.
Yeah.
Go watch the Candyman can scene and watch when that kid gets fucking decked.
They're gonna be like, go watch the Candyman as well.
Actually, Candyman was recommended.
Yeah, Wonka is pretty bad. I feel like if they were trying to actually do it legitimately, it would have been like a horror movie for adult millennials who liked the one as a kid.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, it would have been bad, right? It would have been it just would have been Joker for Willy Wonka, right? It would have been Todd Phillips directed, and it would have been terrible, and it would have been ripping off a bunch of shit that had come before it, anti-hero stories. But like, that would make more sense.
Oh my God, it's Cape Fear.
Yeah.
It's fucking Cape Fear with Todd Phillips doing it. He's just gonna ape all of the Scorsese reimagining.
This is Cape Fear. No, like, I agree. I think if you wanted to do something with what, see, now this is where we start talking about this shit.
See,
and
when it
somebody out
becomes
there
public
listening, and then they
domain,
go,
though, it's gonna go that fucking Winnie the Pooh route with the blood and honey shit. It's gonna be like blood and chocolate.
I heard that was very bad.
It is very bad.
Yeah, that
it's gonna
was
be the
bad.
same shit.
I think you could do something with Wonka as an anti-hero because he closes the factory, right? Is at the start of the movie, the factory's been closed for years. You could actually like get into him becoming an increasing asshole, and as he takes on more, like he takes over more and more of the chocolate industry, and then he wants to hold everything like tighter to the chest, right? And that's why he gets rid of everyone else and enslaves Oompa Loompas. Like, you could get into something with that and go with that direction.
What you do is you hire Paul
Again, it's not
Thomas
gonna be a kids
Anderson,
movie.
Okay, I'm
and
listening.
you get basically you just make a script that is Wonka, but there will be blood. And you get him to shoot and let him do the cinematography. Yeah, exactly. It's obviously, it just writes itself. It's all there. Wonka clearly is Daniel Plainview.
Does he
just
kill a
kills more
pastor
children.
at the end of the movie?
Oh yeah, definitely.
With a bowling
he does
pin?
it with a crucifix
Or
made of
Slugsworth
chocolate
or whatever.
He just fucking
Yeah.
smacks his fucking face around with it.
I like it.
I've abandoned my Oompa Loompas.
It's filled with strawberry jelly too, so it's got the blood kind of motif
Oh,
going.
okay.
Yeah, there you go, the
Yeah,
blood of
right.
Christ.
There will be chocolate.
Anyways, fuck Mike TV.
Look at me, I'm gonna be the first person in the world to be sent by television! Mike, get away from that thing!
Stop, don't come back.
Dixon, what do you got for your recommend or refute?
Yeah, so I saw the new Alex Garland movie, Civil War.
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up
Every time
activity.
I survived the war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
But here we are.
Citizens of America, the so-called Western forces of Texas and California have suffered a very great defeat.
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car! There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you?
That just came out last week, and I saw it in IMAX. It was a pretty cool experience to see. I love Alex Garland. I was very excited yet hesitant to see this movie. Annihilation is one of my favorite films. It's so good. We talked about it on, I believe, the Noted version of this podcast, but yep. I fucking love that movie so much. John and I recently saw Ex Machina in IMAX because A24 is doing like they're putting out their movies and remastering them for IMAX and putting them out. So Ex Machina was the first one that they did a couple weeks ago, and we went and saw that. And I like Ex Machina. I kind of felt similarly the second time I saw it. It's like it's good and it's interesting, but I don't think it's as good as like a lot. There's so many bros out there that like fucking love Ex Machina, and I'm like, you just like that there's like Alicia Vikander as a sex doll, AI that you could fuck, like that seems like this thing that like, just a lot of tech bros want to get down with. But like I loved Annihilation, and I really loved Men, his most recent movie before this, and I feel like nobody saw that, and that's a shame. And I really would hope that more people will go back to that at some point. But Civil War was, really pushed by A24. It's this big movie. It was actually the biggest premiere in A24's history. So that's interesting to see that they are kind of getting more traction now with their films. I don't think it's going to have the staying power of something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which made a bunch of money over a lot of really good weekends in a row that just people kept going back to it. I don't think Civil War is going to have that type of impact, but it made good money in its opening weekend, and I'm glad to see that. I was skeptical going in because of the reasons that most people were kind of skeptical about this movie. It's a British guy making a movie about an American Civil War. And, you see in the trailer, they're talking about like Texas and California coming together. And you're like, what? That would never happen. That's weird. Like, is that just a misunderstanding of American political dynamics or what's going on? And I've been seeing a lot of critic reviews that I think are just not really getting what the movie is about, being like, this is just not politically what America is, and this is just a misunderstanding of our dynamics, and it's just like, what is it even trying to say? It's not trying to make a comment about whether the right's bad or the left's bad. It's just like a movie that's kind of up its own ass and doesn't make any sense. And I strongly disagree with that critique. I think Alex Garland has made better movies than Civil War, but I do think Civil War is very good. It's really not about the war and the political dynamics. It's about the journalists involved in the war. You have Kirsten Dunst playing a famous photojournalist who has become very cynical throughout her career of 20 plus years of being a wartime photojournalist all around the world, and now she's having to photograph the American Civil War. She is traveling with a coworker of hers who is a written journalist who writes articles, and they have determined that they are going to go to Washington, D.C. to interview the president before the secessionists take over the Capitol and murder him. And this is a weird dynamic where Nick Offerman plays the president. He's in his third term as president. It's some sort of totalitarian thing where he has seized power. He has made the concept of journalists illegal. Apparently in Washington, D.C., journalists are shot on sight. Texas and California are fighting against America. There's also Florida doing its own weird secessionist thing as a separate group. And so you're not really clear exactly what the dynamics are between these entities, because you're just kind of in the shit with these characters and you get little bits of information as they kind of move along. And it becomes a road trip type of story where they start out in New York and they become determined to go to Washington, D.C., but they have to take a very circuitous route around blockades and war that is occurring to try to get there. And they're trying to beat the Texas and California forces to get to the president and interview him before, right on the verge of him getting overthrown and losing power. It's a really interesting story. So, right off the bat, they are at this hotel in New York about to leave for this road trip, and they run into an older journalist who wants to get to the front lines in Charlottesville. They're like, sure, you can come with us. And then a very young journalist played by Kaylee Spaney, who is kind of idolizes Kirsten Dunst's character and wants to be a photojournalist like her. Kirsten Dunst is very upset by this because she's incredibly cynical and professional, and she's like, I don't need this fucking kid around here just fucking things up and getting in the way. And so you have this dynamic with these four characters as they're going around and encountering these different weird things in Civil War America as they're trying to make their way to Washington, D.C. I think the critiques about the movie that are missing the point, that are like, what is this trying to say about Republicans and Democrats and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not what the movie is trying to say. It's not trying to comment on America's current political dynamic. It's not trying to say that one side is good and another side is bad. It's trying to say that war is bad right? It's an anti-war film that is kind of saying, whatever your political disposition is, modern political discourse has gotten to a point where like we feel like we are so different from each other and that we are on the verge of war at any point. And I think that's what Garland is trying to say with the film is that this is like war is a thing that America has glorified throughout its history, right? It's like the Revolutionary War. Like that's why we exist as a country, because we told Britain to go fuck themselves and we went out and killed them and sent them away and we became our own thing and we just do whatever we want and Second Amendment bullshit and we go out and do foreign colonialism and all these things. And war has always been glorified in America. And I think Garland is trying to kind of turn that idea back on America itself. And it's like, okay, well, what if this happens here locally? Like, how does that look, for you guys if that occurs? And you see the war through the lens of these photojournalists who are, kind of just used to this and they're numb to the idea and they're treating it almost as if, Kirsten Dunst's character has been photographing every foreign war that has been going on since she has been doing this professionally for 20 plus years. And she makes a comment at one point. She's like, I always thought when I was taking pictures of these foreign wars and sending them back home that I was sending a message to not do this anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. Like we don't have to do this. We don't have to keep fighting these wars. Here's why. Here's a picture of the horrible things that are occurring, all this blood and carnage. And, no one actually learned the lesson, and we're just doing this now here domestically. I think the movie is it's really interesting. It's not a perfect movie. I don't think it's Garland's best movie, but I do think it is a really interesting watch and has some fascinating things to say, not just about war itself, but also about the act of documenting war and whether that is even worth doing. And, these efforts to provide data and information about what's going on in these foreign wars and taking pictures and writing stories about what's happening on the ground. Does that even matter at the end of the day? Does it prevent wars? Does it lead to the end of wars from people seeing these images? Or is it just kind of a gross entertainment that doesn't really actually lead to any real change? The soundtrack is fascinating in this movie, where there are times where they come across little skirmishes as they're going around the country and they start filming them. And there are these needle drops of like rap songs or pop songs that are just completely dissonant from the horrifying images that you see on screen. And I think it's a really interesting way to explore the idea of, are we doing this, or are we trying to document this war for the point of, trying to end war and not have this anymore? Or are we doing it because people like this shit, right? And
it's content.
It's feeding the bloodlust of the American population rather than being a deterrent to doing this going forward. So, I think it's a really interesting movie. The fact that so many critics seem just dumbfounded about what it's trying to say, I think is really a really fascinating indictment of where we have become as a country today, and the fact that war is bipartisan and doesn't seem to matter anymore. And an anti-war movie that is just trying to get rid of red, blue, left, right politics just goes over the head of the vast majority of movie critics is hilarious to me, and very upsetting at the same time. But I think it's a really interesting movie that is definitely worth people going to see. I saw it in IMAX. Really cool to see in that type of format. The sound is really great, and it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Do you think the title is what is kind of throwing it off? Because I do feel like, I've heard really, really good things about it, but I've also heard the discourse around, what it's saying, or is it realistic or whatever, which I think says more about the way people are thinking about America.
Yes.
That this would bother them so much. It's like, this is not how the war is gonna happen. The discussion
Right.
Instead of instead of like, hey, what is it? Yeah, I wonder if the title is what kind of draws the attention to it.
I definitely think that's part of it, right? It's a very controversial title. It's provocative. It gets people going, but it's not. The movie is much less controversial than the title or the trailer would lead you to believe,
Right.
and I think that's part of the point, right? And it's interesting to me. I feel like people who see the movie and they're like, "Oh, that's less controversial than I was expecting," and this has some interesting things to say. These are like the rational people who are like, "Oh, okay, this is interesting. It has something to say." And then the people who come out of it are like, "That's not the war that I'm gonna wage." Like those are the fucking crazies who are. And it's like I read an article this past week by a critic who I really respect, and I was so disappointed in it. It was just this bullshit about like, this is not how America would be, and this is just like a trying to make a movie about how great journalists are, but it's not actually getting there. And like the movie is actually critical of journalists also. Like, if you fucking pay attention to what's going on, it's not just trying to glorify these journalists who are out there in the shit. Like, it is putting the camera on them to examine whether they are actually doing anything good or just propagating the problems.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think it's very different than what the discourse is around it from reviews and what people thought it was going to be from the trailers. It feels like all the critics that saw it and wrote middling reviews thought it was going to be what the trailer was, and then were mad that it wasn't what the trailer was.
That it wasn't the ISS, basically, that fucking shitty film about America versus Russia. Same thing. Yeah. It's interesting. The more that you talk about it, it reminds me of. I talked with a few friends about the Frederick Wiseman film that we watched recently, which I will not attempt to say.
Plaisir or something.
Yeah. That
the one about the French restaurant.
Yeah, the French restaurant one. And I remember talking to a friend about it, and he was just like, "Yeah, I walked out like halfway through it because it just seemed tone deaf." I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "I don't know. It just felt like it glorified what it was like trying to show." And I was like, "I don't think so." I very much. Did you sit for the table with the bros where you talk about the tannins
Did you get to that part?
Want to please you now, but they'll always be there for you? Like that's just like life itself holding a mirror up to how fucking absurd like class structure can be, and these kinds of things can happen. And it's just like, yeah, like I feel like when you read a critic's review, especially one that you really respect, and you see that take, it's like, I guess that they just landed on that side of the fence when they fell from it. And I would love to see more critics come back and do an edit of their article later and be like, after like further review, after further watches, like, here's what it means to me now, because that's what film does. It just shifts to where you are and who you are and what you're trying to state. And I feel like in the moment, like, some people could be in this weird, they're clutching, they're afraid politically of what's going to happen. And they will use that lens to look at whatever art they experience too, and to reduce it to something that it's not, or to miss the point in favor of something they want to believe is true and how it misses the point.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen Civil War yet. I want to see it. I did see another Alex Garland film recently. It's not one he directed though. It's one he wrote.
Oh.
And that was also about humanity and also about trust, called Sunshine. That was like a science fiction film where in 2057 the sun is going to go out, which is bullshit, but whatever.
Okay.
And they like humanity.
That's a date that sounds so far in the future, but then when we get to it,
it's not.
We'll be like, oh yeah,
it's not
this
far
was really
enough.
far in the future.
And like Cillian Murphy and Chris Evans have to go with like a squad of other scientists.
It's a weird cast to put together. Cillian Murphy and Chris Evans.
It's like a pretty stacked cast too. Like when you look at the other names in it, and like they're all going out, and I feel like it maybe has some parallels to, because Alex Garland always, I think in all of his scripts, does a really good job of having rational characters caught up in extraordinary circumstances or put under pressure in a certain way. And so like Sunshine has the same thing where it's like, it's essentially like a more grounded Interstellar, where they're like, we're just going to fly this big ass nuke into the sun and hope that it actually reignites the sun. It's like a better version.
We're going to do an Icarus.
Yeah, it's a better version of the core, and that the spaceship is called
That's the
Icarus.
name of the ship.
Yeah. And they're like, Icarus 1, we lost contact, and we're in Icarus 2. But every step of the way, there's like, one person gets stranded outside, and they're like trying to repair something, and they're gonna get obliterated by like the rays of the sun. And everybody's like, we need to mount whatever to save them. And there's one character that's like, that's fucking stupid. We need to stick to the mission. This is about saving humanity, not one fucking person. And it has ethical dilemmas and like the moral dilemmas. Unfortunately, that movie falls apart, becomes a Paul W.S. Anderson film at the end of it. It's way more like a Resident Evil where the edits get too fast and a bunch of dumb shit happens.
That sounds like Danny Boyle's fault, not Alex Garland's.
That's probably Danny Boyle's fault, not Alex Garland's, but it definitely is just like, come on, man, you could have done better. So, like, does Civil War feel strong all the way through when you were watching it, or were there parts where you're like, this is kind of a lull? Like, I don't know about this.
So it's like an hour 49, and like that's one of the things that I think Garland does really well is he makes these sweeping epics that feel like they're 3 hours long when you think back about how many things that happened, but then you're like, oh wait, Annihilation is only like an hour 52. Like, how did he fit all of that movie into that amount of time? Like, when you're watching it, it breezes by.
Yeah.
Like, it's well edited and well paced, but like you think back and you're like, oh yeah, Annihilation is this huge epic, and you're like, oh, actually it's pretty short movie. And so Civil War is kind of that way too. When you think back, you're like, oh yeah, it's this whole sweeping thing where all these things happen. It's an hour 48 or something like that.
Okay.
So it's a pretty reasonable, story to consume, but there is this, kind of epic story and all these sweeping ideas that are, a lot of the ideas are kind of in the peripheral as you focus on these characters and what they're going through.
Yeah.
And I think he does that pretty well. There are some scenes that are very affecting and some parts that, don't work quite as well, but are still good. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Like, I liked it a lot. It didn't hit me super hard like Annihilation did or like Men did, but I do think it's a really good movie that is kind of trying to get to the heart of where we are as a society right now, where like, like let's cut through the bullshit with all these political divisions and just be like, why do we fucking have wars? And what is like, let's, instead of having your normal political divisions in America that you could have, we're going to just have arbitrary ones that don't matter so that we can just focus on this idea of war and why we do it and why both parties seem to support it and all these things. And I think it's an interesting way to craft an anti-war movie today without getting bogged down in a lot of weird political discourse. Yet the discourse on the movie is all about weird political discourse that the movie is not actually trying to talk about.
That's usually the sign of like, I would say a really strong critique. That was like when Cuties came out and it had like such a harsh like message about the over sexualization of like pop culture and how it permeates to like younger generations. And Ted Cruz is out there being like, why would they make this pedophile movie? And you're just like, fuck off, Ted Cruz. You don't understand this shit. But yeah, it sounds like we're talking about Skycrawlers too when you talk about this.
Oh, interesting.
Just like that sort of like, what the fuck is war for? What exactly does it fuel, and how do we propagate it? And like
war,
that war machine.
Good God.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's interesting. Like, I was trying to think of something that seems similar in premise, and there's a lot of like sci-fi that kind of deals with that, or you sort of have a general, just like, something that is set during a war we previously had, but just focuses on like how shitty it is.
Yep.
But to set it in the US and have the US divided brings it a lot closer to home to make you think more about it.
Yeah.
Since Red
But then
Dawn.
I guess it brings up, because I was like, the next closest thing I can think of that does kind of work in that premise is like Handmaid's Tale.
Oh yeah, I can see
being
that.
that like kind of American collapse, and it feels like it is recent. But I was like, everything else I can think of where like America is kind of at a war with itself is like sci-fi enough to be removed.
Yep.
But then that also removes what you're saying about the sort of like now, like what is media's role? What is our role in wars and our, the love of war, continuing with wars to make it relevant to now, not I'm just imagining it.
Yeah, and all of the movies that come out now that are like realistic portrayals of war or are more about our recent wars in our colonial imperial efforts overseas in the Middle East or in Asia or Europe or wherever, and it feels removed when you have that conversation, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
it's a movie about the war in Afghanistan or, whatever. And it's like, yeah, we did these horrible things, but they happened way over there and we don't have to look at them. And it's not like really hitting close to home. And like, yeah, when you have a movie that is about a siege by Americans against Americans to destroy Washington, D.C. and everything that we have like built as a country, it definitely kind of changes that conversation and it makes it hit a little more close to home.
Yeah, and if you talk about a real war, there's already a narrative that I don't think you can ever get out of your mind. Like you said, America always writes itself as the victor in the wars that it lost as well, but we were there for a good reason or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you get into like it's
every
shitty,
war
like in
since
Jarhead,
Vietnam. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, even if you get into like it's shitty and it's stupid like in Jarhead, it still is like, well, that was a war we claimed victory and claimed it was all
Mission
good and we were there
accomplished
for good reason.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Watch me hit this drive.
Yeah, but to have this, it's like we don't know. The movie doesn't give you. I'm assuming based on what you're saying, it doesn't give you the reasons of like why it happened, how it got into
No.
it. It doesn't tell you which side is right or wrong
It
necessarily.
just puts you in the shit and you kind of have to piece it together as you go. And there's no coherent like reason why one side is fighting the other. They never state what's going on. They tend to like paint both sides negatively, right? Where they're like, the president declared himself a third term and he's like saying that they're clearly winning and about to defeat the enemy forces while they're like knocking on the door of DC and about to destroy them. And, the Texas and California forces are committing war crimes and all these things, right? Everybody is painted as the villain. And in war, that's generally the case, right? Like, there aren't good wars and bad wars. There's just fucking war. And, none of them are justified.
Yeah. Well, speaking of war, if we can move on, you're recommending Civil War.
Yes, I am. Go see it in the, best format you can. If you can see it in IMAX or like a Dolby Cinema or something like that, go do that. It's a good experience. And the sound design and the visuals are really great. It's definitely worth paying that few extra bucks.
I should just clarify. Okay. You're recommending the movie Civil War. You're not recommending actual Civil War.
Good point, John. I had just said that no war is justifiable and that I recommended Civil War. No, the movie by Alex Garland. It's good. You should watch it. You should not go into war with anyone else. If anybody listening to this podcast is thinking about going into war, don't fucking do it. Whether you are a head of state thinking about committing a preemptive strike or you are just a random person thinking about enlisting, don't fucking do it.
Yeah, don't war, people.
Yeah.
I've got in my notes here. Watch Civil War on the plane. Got it.
I have in my notes.
On the worst screen,
best format I can watch it on.
Participate
at
in
an awkward
Civil War.
angle so the person behind me can see.
Notes scribbled down. Speaking of war and films about war, let's talk about one I'm bringing for a recommend or refute. I've got mixed feelings on it, but ultimately, spoilers, I am going to recommend it because I feel like a lot of people talk about how great it fucking is, which is Saving Private Ryan. That's the 1998 Steven Spielberg film.
Colonel, I've got something you should know about. Yes? These two men died in Normandy. This one at Omaha Beach. The three men are brothers, sir. I've just learned that this afternoon their mother's getting all three telegrams. That's not all. There's a fourth brother, the youngest. He's somewhere in Normandy. We don't know where.
That boy is alive. We're gonna send somebody to find him. And we're gonna get him the hell out of there.
Some private in the 101st lost 3 of his brothers and he's got a ticket home.
It's not gonna be easy finding one particular soldier in the whole damn war.
I don't know anything about Ryan. It's just a name. But if finding him so he can go home, if that earns me the right to get back to my wife, well then, that's my mission.
That eventually spawned off into Band of Brothers and anything else.
A bunch of Clint Eastwood movies.
Yeah, a lot of Clint Eastwood movies.
The World War II industrial complex.
That's right. Yes, of course. Marketing to all those dads out there who just need something to watch.
The History Channel just had a second life after this movie.
That's right. Skyrocketed. Buy your stocks now. Is history publicly changed? I don't know, but World War II should be.
I'm sure it's owned by one of the publicly traded monopolies. It's owned by like Viacom or Warner or one of those.
Whatever it became.
Paramount or somebody.
Saving Private Ryan is a film about a troop in World War II. They do like the Normandy beach landing, and that's a big iconic scene. It's been parodied and spoofed in a lot of things. Like Sausage Party has a whole sequence like it. Conker's Bad Fur Day, the old N64 game, had a moment it. There's a lot of other things where it's just like, yeah, like the scene where there's a ringing in the ears and you see a dude and his arm is detached and he grabs and just walks off and a bunch of people are being murdered. Like Saving Private Ryan has that, and it's the origination point of like, how realistic can we make a war movie? And I feel like in many ways it is the anti-Come and See. Like it intends to be sort of reverent to the sacrifices made in World War II and also an anti-war film. But
which is hard to do.
It doesn't succeed, in my opinion, because it has so much violence and so much gore, and it's also appalling, and yet it's so reverent of what happens and the sacrifices made that at the end of the movie, the thesis statement is much more like, I think the sacrifices were worth it and we should respect those.
Right.
And that is the problem with the film. When you watch the opening 10
World
to
War
15
II is
minutes,
the good war, John. How dare you speak ill against
as
it?
Phil Hartman said in Small Soldiers.
I think World War II was my favorite war.
And like, it really is one of those. So when I watched this movie, I did it with an experimental haptic vest that would give me the vibrations to feel the war.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
It's the most American way you could experience it, is to get ready to love the shock of the shell, my friend.
Were you feeling like bullets hit you with
It
this
wasn't
vest?
like, it's not like that much of an impact, but like you could feel the rumble of tanks in the distance and that kind of, it added a little extra, oomph to it. I won't lie.
Raise your heart rate
especially
a little bit.
during, it raised your heart rate, especially during the fucking Normandy sequence when everybody's fucking dying and it's chaos. The one thing I will say that this film absolutely nails, and I would say that I love it in a filmmaking perspective, is the documentarian style is so fucking jarring and gripping. And like you really can't, like until they actually know what their mission is, this troop of like, we're going to go save Private Ryan. When the schmaltz enters and they're like, there's this one mother who has 4 sons and 3 of them are dead. And we're going to send one of them home to her just to prove that we're America and we love our troops and we love the boys. And like, we'll spare one of your children. like when it gets to that, you're like, this is fucking thin weaving of a story in the middle of conflict. It like, I still haven't watched Apocalypse Now and I want to. I was really tempted to follow it up with this, but like there's just so much of it that visually tells you war is hell and narratively tells you, but it's worth it. And I fucking hated that part of it. I absolutely did not. Like,
war is purgatory.
It's
worth it when you get to the other side.
Exactly. And so like I understand that that people sacrifice their lives in the thick of the war, and that is what should be continued to be remembered. That like that's like a valuable thing to like, don't forget the people that sacrifice something for like this country and what we were trying to do there, supposedly like in these different ways that we were trying to do it. I don't want to say it for every war, but for World War II in particular, like we fucking waited for a really long time to get involved. And then when we did, we aggrandized how like, oh yeah, we got really involved.
How much
we
impact
sent,
we
like,
had.
wave after wave of our own men onto the beaches of Normandy.
Remember when it used to be really hard to get America to participate in foreign wars?
Yeah, right?
God.
Like now we're just all in.
You had to like directly attack our domestic soil.
We'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, we're getting in. And like it gets mixed up so much in that patriotism of like, sacrifice is necessary sometimes and you need to understand the weight of that sacrifice, but it's not all the time. And it shouldn't be a conscripted, like, hey, we're going to go fight this one country. We're going to go help our ally and you dying means everything to that cause. you should be able to dissent to that. You should be able to disagree with that. And you should be able to, step away and say like, I don't agree with the fucking conflict there. But like Hitler was at the fucking gates in World War II. Hitler was doing a lot of shit. And like Italy and Japan were fucking pushing on several fronts. And it makes sense. Like when you get into talking about whether or not we should have nuked Japan, now you're fucking gray territory, my friend. You're real fucking gray territory. But like, yeah, when there are aggressors, sure, you got to step up if it is global conflict. But if it's like countries against countries, there's questions about it. And Saving Private Ryan,
or when your allies are committing imperial genocide, you have to help them. That's the rule.
Yeah.
Like,
my bad.
I'm sorry. They're our allies. We have to commit genocide with them. Otherwise, we look like bad friends.
Yeah. Like. Just
if your friends committed genocide, would you commit genocide too?
Yeah,
yes. The answer is yes.
If your friends genocided off of a bridge, would you genocide? Or if they downloaded genocide, would you download it? Like
downloaded genocide is actually genocide.
Oh my god.
But yeah, Saving Private Ryan, like it has so many emotional moments, and it's a stacked fucking cast too.
Vin Diesel, motherfucker.
Vin Diesel's in it.
This is the first Fast and the Furious movie right here. He's driving tanks out there and drifting over Frenchmen.
Which he dies trying to save family.
Yeah.
That's like how the movie fucking goes. But there are just moments, and Barry Pepper's in it. Barry Pepper, we all love him from Battlefield Earth. We all know he was in that.
Also, We Were
Goodboy
Soldiers, the Mel Gibson Vietnam propaganda war movie.
Yeah.
That tried to make Vietnam good.
You know what I just realized is I was trying to say like Johnny Two Shoes, good whatever. Really, I was thinking of Barry Pepper in Battlefield Earth, whose name is Johnny Goodboy Tyler. That's what I was trying to call you.
Oh my god!
It's like somebody from The Outsiders.
Just a great L. Ron Hubbard name. Really gives you some empathy to him.
Barry Pepper's the one who like quotes scripture before he snipes people to death.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. He was the Chris Kyle of fucking this crowd before he got American
cool
Sniper.
Shit
I am vengeance, saith the Lord.
So much wrong with this movie, but it's so impeccably made and it's so compelling visually. And if you can really see through that fucking veil of the sacrifice is worth it propaganda, like if you start applying it to every war, it's bullshit. Like for World War II, it was a necessary thing. And we didn't have good strategists for some of that shit. Definitely evident by the beginning of the movie when everybody just throws body after body onto Normandy Beach. It was like we just needed young boys fucking throwing themselves at the beach and getting fucking shot to hell.
We don't make movies about the invasion on the beaches in Italy.
Yeah. We don't do any of that shit anymore. Like,
The Irishman has a little scene about the Italian front that is just devastating.
But yeah, like that was where like I enjoyed the filmmaking aspects of the movie. I found it very well made. Steven Spielberg, he's not fucking around. He knows what he's trying to do. It's just like when the schmaltz came in, I started disagreeing with it and it became dissonant for me. And I just couldn't understand. I just couldn't reconcile because I know what's ahead of this. I've seen Jarhead 2 and 3. I know what all of these other military movies have in store for America, and it's all permission to get some and fucking just firing wildly into the air and shooting any of the Ravs, you know?
Ravs.
Russians, Arabs, and villains.
Oh, well, then, yes, I guess that is why I'm here.
All of that is what, you know, cinema and the propaganda machine and everything else has become.
At least Team America came after this.
It's true. Team America did a great job skewering the shit out of all of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that this feels like it's sort of the antithesis to like a Come and See, where Come and See, it has gripping scenes. It has documentary style filmmaking in it. It uses the population that was traumatized by war crimes to tell a story that nobody wants to tell ever again, and that made the director retire after, and that they fucking never, like, they were like, we did it. Okay, there you go. It's in the ether now. Everybody gets to observe it, and hopefully nobody will do a war again. But no, that's fucking not it. Now we get Saving Private Ryan. I texted a friend after watching it, and they were like, fuck yeah, man, that movie's my jam. And I'm hoping that they mean by filmmaking style, because like Anything beyond that, I'm just like, no.
I fucking love going to save women's final living sons in foreign territory and killing like hundreds of people in the process.
So about it. Can't believe it. Yeah, we're going to make Saving Private Ryan 2. It's going to be like Top Gun Maverick.
Saving Private Ryan again.
They put like body cams on this time and it's fucking just, anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that is kind of what we were saying there too, of like, if you make it about Vietnam or Korea or the American Civil War, like it's easy to be like, what did we get out of this? We just, died for seemingly nothing. But if you make it about World War II or the American Revolution, it's like, there's such a narrative of like all these good things that came because of it. But yeah, it would be interesting to actually look at, there was like a unit in the Pacific Theater that, it was like they didn't take prisoners.
Yeah.
And the Japanese actually started to learn that. And so they had to cover up, they would like tear off their insignia or whatever when they went to capture Japanese so that they wouldn't know, because if they knew, they wouldn't surrender.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that would be, you want to talk about something in World War II that's like shitty and show the Americans were doing shitty shit too.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the other thing is Saving Private Ryan doesn't glorify it all the way through. There are moments where like the band of brothers in this try to commit war crimes. And some of them do. They actively just kill people surrendering. They fucking will slaughter, troops that are at a disadvantage and unarmed. And then
you're like, boys will be boys.
Yeah, exactly. That's just what they're going to do. They're all worked
when
up
you
about
end it with like a salute at Arlington and all of the something
and
else.
You end up with the family watching this dude cry as he's like, all these guys sacrifice themselves, and they also committed war crimes, but they sacrificed themselves for me. And like we're not going to talk about that with my family. So yeah, very mixed fucking movie for me. I recommend it from the filmmaking standpoint. If you can recognize it and the elements of it that are anti-war, and you can disagree with the moments that have fed into pro-war, then I think that it's a profound experience. It can be very eye-opening, and it can give you the empathy to understand that these like young boys were just fucking conscripted and thrown into a fucking meat grinder, just a full meat grinder. I would say that like towards the end of the movie, I didn't really cry at any of the moments when the score started sweeping or any of that. I cried at the beginning when so many young men were just being fucking slaughtered and mowed down. And I just thought, my God, I didn't need to be told that they had a family. I fucking knew it and I felt it and it sucked.
Yeah.
And that was the anti-war moment. And then after that, it just kind of becomes a tense thriller and not as much on how shitty everything else is.
The only reason you get saved is you had your brothers already die. Like none of the people should be dying, right?
Yeah.
Hey, good news. We came to save you. Also bad news. Your 4 brothers are dead.
Everybody else is dead.
Come on. Get in the car.
And then when they show up and Matt Damon is, sorry, spoilers everybody for a movie that's like 20 years old or whatever. And when Matt Damon is just like,
years old.
I'm not leaving because I have a mission and my brother's here to defend. I've got my whole family here. And like, that was when I was like, oh, bullshit. Like this fucking, that dude, I think any of those boys would have been scared as shit and wanted to leave. And it would have been a more
for any reason,
compelling story to see somebody who, tried to leave and didn't, or that they got pinned down and there was a tragedy and like that kind of thing. It just make war as hellish as possible, not as hellish with valorance and like grandeur. I don't want that. I don't want to propagate it. So,
okay. Important question.
Yep.
Exactly what is the stance of America? How many sons must die before
it's
before
3.
they come pick you up?
3 sons.
Is it 3?
I think they killed 3.
Is it still 3? Because we don't have as many kids on average anymore. So it feels like that's tough. Like, do you think they brought it down a little?
Is it so? I also have very mixed feelings about this movie, and like a lot of my problems with it is that the plot is just so dumb, and like really like some upper echelon general is like moved to tears by some woman who has had 4 of her 5 sons die, and like we have to redirect strategic people to go save this one guy and bring him home for this poor woman who lost 4 of her sons. Like that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. I have no idea if it's based in fact, and I have never made an effort to learn. If it is based in fact, that makes the movie even dumber, I think.
No.
If it was just like some bullshit fake story that was written by the screenwriter.
Here's what you do, okay?
Yeah.
You turn this into anti-war and satire. in the middle of him doing that, he's also doing press photos as he's talking about how they should do this and saying like,
this
we
will
need
be
to
a great story.
Yeah. And he's telling,
we got the times here. They'll document it. Yeah.
And because he like, he also, he quotes like Abraham Lincoln, and that's the whole, he's like, during the Civil War, that's when they sent these troops to retrieve one boy who was lost because this woman had lost too much.
Mm-hmm.
And like you do that, and then you just have a series of fuck ups where like Ryan is killed and they try to figure out how to replace Ryan with the other Ryan that they find. And like, you're going to be, for your country, son, you're going to have to go undercover as this woman's son.
It becomes the Principal Skinner origin story.
Exactly
the Armin Tamzarian
story.
Yeah.
And you just fucking like, you push it to that extent of absurdity because the military needs a success. We need a win. Okay. We need a story to tell. And like, I know that nobody would fucking have the balls to do that, but goddamn, if that would be the most biting indictment of that kind of shit.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Jesus.
So there is actually a military provision called the sole survivor policy that is that, where if you've had someone in your family die in service, either you get out or you don't have to go in.
Yeah.
And there was a time, and there was something in World War II that was like a certain number of brothers, so they did vaguely base it on that. But yeah, I don't know if it's like the fact that it wasn't just like the first one and then you get all of them. Like, it's like how many? Like, when you have to draw that line.
What if you have
so
a dozen? What if cheaper by the dozen, all the kids went to war? And then, like,
I wish Steve Martin.
How many of them have to die before Steve Martin gets his kids back?
Is it when you're down to your last one? Back. Is that always
Oh my God. But I will say there are a lot of very affecting scenes. Like, I will never forget the scene of Giovanni Ribisi bleeding out and crying for his mother.
Oh, fuck, man. Yeah,
like,
that shit. Just
it's so
brutal.
affecting, and he is so good in that scene. And like, there's stuff like that is very visceral and anti-war and fucked up. But it feels like Spielberg is, he's definitely not making an anti-war film. He's making a war is hell, but it's worth it for the greater good film.
Yeah.
And I just fundamentally disagree with that concept. But yeah, I mean, like, there are scenes that are done so well, and it's like, it's weird. Like, I'm not a Spielberg fan. Like, I really don't like a lot of his big movies that everybody loves.
Except for Jaws.
I love Jaws. Jaws is great. Jaws is my favorite Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan, I think, is probably my second favorite of his movies because of just how high the highs are and how well it is done.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of his movies don't have those highs, right? Like, it's like E.T. or Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. It's like, there's fun stuff in them. They're kind of popcorny movies, but like, they don't have the real serious filmmaking high art moments that Saving Private Ryan has that really fucking punch you in the face.
Yeah.
But then you have this kind of propagandistic, yes, it was all worth it kind of bullshit, strap on your uniform and let's go to whatever the next war they tell us to go to kind of idea that just, I don't know really what the movie is trying to say, or if Spielberg really even fucking understands.
Because it came out like after the Gulf War was fucking instigated. And like, there's no relative commentary. His son's not a Marine or anything going over there. And like, there's nothing to really, balance that out other than like, it's patriotism and it's valor. Like, that's what you do. And I feel like that's what's missing from it, is to put that new perspective of like, some wars, like, if they really are thrust upon you, you rise to the occasion. It is the hero's journey of like, you got to fucking wade through this shit and it's going to be fucked up and you're going to grow in like ways that you never anticipated. And then other wars are fucking absolutely pointless and just propagated by machinations beyond your control, and to have some kind of dissent and disagreement with it. And so instead it's just, no, just here you go. I think the only other note that I really had was when I watched the scene and they went out to the like cemetery where all of the crosses were. I didn't feel anything, but I remembered a fistful of dollars and just running into that, like, and the spinning sequence of how many deaths there were in the middle of that. And it's just like, because that whole entire scene in Fistful of Dollars is based on, or is that The Good, Bad, and the Ugly? What am I fucking thinking?
You're talking about
thinking Good, the Bad, and the
Sorry,
Ugly.
I'm a fucking idiot. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I was trying to rack my brain.
I knew
for
where
that
you
scene
were
from
at.
Fistful of Dollars. I was like, I'm pretty sure
You're like, that's not at all. Sorry. Yeah. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah, that whole sequence in the cemetery where everybody's trying to find out where the gold is, and it's this greed-driven thing, and the entire time they're surrounded by death, like all of the cost of war. And that had such a profound impact on me that this fucking movie did not, looking at all of the death that actually was racked up.
Right.
And it just, because of that dissonance I felt, I couldn't shed anything. I had no tears for it. The beginning of it had me, and the end of it lost me, and I felt so bad about it. But yeah, it was impeccably made, impeccably done. Like, I like the style, and I appreciate what was on display, and I feel like it just needed to be harder into the anti-war message that was kind of woven into it, but not utilized to the full extent that it should have been. So
yeah, I think it's also that interesting time period then, like, coming out in 1998, because I've realized this with some other movies where the turn from the late 90s to post September 11th, and then now even further along, like, you go back and you watch some of these things, it's like, yeah, it's not the same thing. It's not the same feeling anymore. I think you're talking about, in the late 90s, the Gen X and young millennials, at the time, young millennials, now we're old millennials.
Yeah.
It did feel like, oh, we don't have anything. And there are these great history from before that you look up to, right? And there's this sort of like disconnectedness. And then it's like, post
the
September 11th, this is
era,
very
like
different.
The end of history.
Yeah. And it's such a turning point. And then, you go back and you're like, I remember when this came out in 98 and seeing it. And yeah, there were a lot of people who were really into it. And it definitely came away as a very patriotic feeling thing. And I think in the immediacy after September 11th, it had a very high patriotic feel because fucking everything did. As the second Gulf War protracted and dragged on, and Afghanistan, that got lost. And I think that now we're in that spot where we kind of look back and are like, yeah, I don't think this was saying what it wanted to say, and also the patriotism doesn't really feel good anymore. And it's interesting looking back.
Yeah, Dixon, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I want to see the movie where, like, a kid is watching Saving Private Ryan, like an American kid is watching Saving Private Ryan, and he's like, yeah, this is fucking coolest shit ever, and then gets, like, recruited into ISIS on Facebook and ends up, like, going to Syria and getting slaughtered and by, like, Bashar al-Assad. Like, I want to see that kind of shit where it's like, this type of movie is the gateway drug into the worst fucking shit you could possibly put yourself into, right? Like, I had friends growing up who were just obsessed with Saving Private Ryan, who watched it way too fucking young, in like 5th grade. They're like, oh my God, dude, you got to see Saving Private Ryan. And I was like, I don't think my parents will let me watch that. I don't know what that is. And like, like those kids that I knew who were getting into that at young ages were like, just obsessed with the military, and like that was their whole thing. They wanted to go be in the army and go fight wars and all these things, and that was their like whole aesthetic. And I don't know what happened to those guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope they're okay. Like I have specific people in my mind that I'm thinking of that I grew up with who were just floored by this specific movie and just made that their whole identity, that they just wanted to go out and be a U.S. Army soldier and go fight wars overseas. And I hope they're still alive. I don't know if they joined the military or what they did, but like, I graduated high school with those kids, and that was still their whole deal, was that's what they wanted to do. And I'm pretty sure there's a couple guys I'm thinking of in particular. I'm pretty sure they went to college, but I don't know if they went to an ROTC program or what they did after that. But, it's like this type of movie, it does lead to, whether it's kids or adults watching this and then deciding to go, join the army and going to their deaths. And I think it's just upsetting to think about how that happens. Is like, people talk about how like, certain movies glorify violence and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know, like nobody talks about that with Saving Private Ryan, but like, I don't know that there is a single movie that has ever led to more people getting involved in horrible violence than the Saving Private Ryan.
I will add one additional note, which is, I watched in the most American way possible with a vest to give me the full experience.
What was it, Kevlar?
Because I really wanted it. I wanted to feel the vibrations of it. And I would say that, like, I could see a lot of other people being like, I'm going to watch all of my war movies this way because it puts me in the battle. But, it's one of those, like, fucking, like, oh, I don't want to actually fight in war, though. But And I would say that drew me in. There was, like, a tactile aspect of it that, like, anytime there was a big punch, not a score sweeping thing, but, like, a bullet shot through somebody, like, I felt it. And it helped me to hit and live in that moment and be like, oh, fuck. Like, it is that suddenness that when the narrative couldn't provide it because it was being a little too heroic with something else, there was sort of a more physical empathy that conjured it. So it was weird to try to watch a movie like that. And it's not I'm going to make it my regular, like, reviewing thing, but I don't even know why I threw that on. I was just like, I'm just going to try it. Fuck it. And that was the wrong movie to pick because it was a little too involved. Way too stressful for that time at night.
Interesting.
But yeah.
Can you wear that vest the next time you watch Love Actually?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
See what happens?
Yeah. Try to find like the most inappropriate movie for you to wear. Do you want the thing from Cyberpunk where you just like jack into someone else's memory of them dying?
Oh, and you see it, you live it, and you feel
yeah, you see it and live it and feel it.
I don't want that. That's what Elon Musk wants, probably.
Have either of you seen Paths of Glory?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's a Kubrick 1957 movie with Kirk Douglas about World War I, and it's a really great anti-war film, but it's about atrocities committed by the French army, which is like, the good guys in theory in World War I. And like, I feel like as a society now, we can't fathom those types of movies. Like, we can't accept them. We can't get them greenlit by studios where it's like, hey, maybe the side we were on also did some bad shit and we should look at that. And I think that movie is really interesting to me and like kind of an underrated early Kubrick film that has some like fascinating, really interesting filmmaking aspects, but also subject matter aspects that it'd be fun to do that on the podcast at some point.
It's weird to me, just talking about that I mean, like, I have people in my life that are close to me that were, my grandfather was a naval in the Pacific War and has a photo album all about what they did in like the Japanese conflict. And I remember my uncle showing it to me with the same demeanor somebody would show you the slideshow from their recent vacation.
Yeah.
You flip to a page that had a trail of dead corpses, or I guess dead corpses redundant. Trail of corpses, Japanese people and soldiers.
Man.
Just had scribbled in my grandfather's handwriting, the only good Jap is a dead Jap. And that fucking rocked me to the core. Because I'd only ever known my grandfather as a sweet man who was like, he gave me quarters when I visited him and did all this other stuff. And I was just like, wow, I don't know how to grapple with that. And I feel like a lot of like America just doesn't know how to grapple with that shit. And they just go,
yeah,
that's weird. And then they move on with their life and reduce it.
Yeah. I mean, you have the like, Germany doesn't necessarily want to talk or confront their stuff, right? They have a lot of ban. Japan kind of just pretty much ignores their history, and we talk about the parts we see as good. But like I said, we don't talk about the internment camps. We don't talk about Andrew Jackson. We don't talk about, the atrocities we committed out there or other countries within that. And that's actually the thing that we need to remember, right? Yeah. Like, just like we need to have stories about the Holocaust and remember the realities of it, we do have to have our similar atrocities included to not continue to have this narrative of it was great.
Yeah.
Right? It was bad. It was bad on all sides.
Go watch Killers of the Flower Moon, people. actually watched a documentary show this week. I'm forgetting what it's called. It was put out by Al Jazeera, and it was about kind of the inverse of the anti-speech crackdown in the U.S., where you have all these university presidents being trotted out in front of Congress, and they're like, "How dare you let people say anti-Semitic things on campus? We're going to make sure you never work in this country again," and blah blah blah. And this was like a half-hour documentary about the Palestinian students who are being just treated horribly and kicked out of their schools and just harassed by Zionist students and activists and things like that. It was kind of looking at the inverse of the normal story that you get in America.
Boycott, the fight for freedom of expression?
No, it's an Al Jazeera documentary show that I saw promoted on Twitter recently that I watched. It was called the episode was called The Palestinian Exception, and it's about the concept of the everybody likes free speech except when it comes to Palestine, and you can't speak out in support of Palestine and against Israeli colonist movements without having implications to your job and getting fired and getting doxxed and all these things. And
I saw that in the recent Texas legislature when Greg Abbott made that executive order where he said that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free as an anti-Semitic statement that you can't use
when it's just calling for equality.
The
fucking U.S. Congress said passed a resolution saying that was hate speech recently.
I saw that as well.
The show is called Fault Lines. So yeah, it was it's on YouTube and it was pretty interesting to see. But it's I thought it was interesting to see a in real time documentarian show about the oppressed side of things, where it's the victors tell the story, and Israel is going to win this genocidal war and it's going to be horrible, and then we're going to hear 20 years from now that it was great and they won because of whatever October 7th terrorism or what have you. But seeing actual real journalism happen on the ground about the side that the atrocities are being committed against, not necessarily on the ground in Palestine, but here in America, people just speaking out against it, I thought was pretty fascinating.
Well, we have to get back to our regular podcast. As depressing and downward.
Hey, one out of every 4 episodes, I go on a rant about Palestine. So,
it's for a good cause. Well, we're wrapping up this recommend or refute episode. We have a refute from Ryan, for Wonka, and a recommend for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And I don't give a shit about Johnny Depp for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
We don't talk about it.
Yeah. And then we have a recommend for Alex Garland's latest film, Civil War, which might be his last. Yep. He said he's tired of directing, I think.
I never believe people when they say that shit.
Yeah, right. He'll be back.
Steven Soderbergh has retired twice. And
Hayao Miyazaki's retired 12 times.
Yeah. They keep coming back. The filmmakers are addicted to that shit.
Yeah, they just can't
Tarantino scrapped his new movie because he's the next movie's gonna be his last, and he was this next movie was working out, but I don't want it to be my last, so he's just not making it.
Oh, okay.
Wait, who is this?
Yeah,
Tarantino.
Oh, is he not making the Film Critic or whatever it was supposed to be called?
Yeah, no, he's just said he's not doing the Film Critic, which, John, you'll be disappointed. He was it just came out as he just started tying it more and more into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
God damn it, I want to.
And then it was
more.
I don't want to make that movie.
Wasn't it already in production?
Yeah,
he just killed it entirely.
This one, but he's so locked in on he's retiring after this movie that he's in the stage
There's
where it
no
has to be
fucking
perfect.
way he retires.
But he's gonna make whatever movie,
the
and then he's
fucking
gonna
balls
make
on
it.
this
He won't
guy to say that he's retiring, and then he's gonna take a pen name probably and fucking.
He'll finally make his movie. Okay, this is the movie that I finally want to make. It'll take him fucking 15 years to make, and then it'll be all right, now I can make my Star Trek movie.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm making movies for them, not for me.
Yeah.
That's the exception. Anyways,
it's the other way around.
So there's a recommendation for Civil War. You have a begrudging recommend from me for Saving Private Ryan.
Lots of caveats around that.
A lot of caveats around that recommend when you watch it. And I would also just throw in a recommend again. I think I mentioned this a lot of episodes back, for Waltz with Bashir, which is an Israeli-made documentary series about another genocide that was committed in the late 1980s, and is done in a very compelling way by the same director who did The Congress.
Okay.
So there you go, Waltz with Bashir. It was 2008.
I remember you talking about this in our Congress episode, yeah.
Yeah. Ari Folman, that's the director. So yeah, I would recommend that. And with that, we'll call this episode to a close. Thank y'all for sticking with us as we deviated into, did we talk about microwaves at the beginning of this fucking episode?
Yeah, there was some Best Buy hate.
Best Buy endorsed, we're not officially endorsed by Best Buy. Techno
Unofficially,
podcast.
though, we are.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, we just can't get them to admit it publicly, but they've told us privately that they like what we're doing.
Of course. They have, allegedly. And towards the end, our anti-war podcast, After Wars.
Well, like after we started talking about Wonka, the whole thing was just anti-war from that point on.
You know, Wonka is the root of all evil, and it will continue to perpetuate those kinds of discussions.
Wars fought over chocolate. That's actually a reality.
That is true. There it is.
That's
so thank y'all for sticking with us through this. I've been your host, John Garcia. With me, as always,
Brian King. End wars. Save physical media.
Yes. What a great call to action.
Hey, if you got to do one or the other, you might as well save physical media.
Yeah. And, of course,
Michael Dixon, thanks for putting up with our bullshit.
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.